Okay, and we'll talk about also the essence of what TOSFOS Shabbos is. Firstly, in Siman Reish Samach Aleph, there is a halacha, Mishnah Berurah elaborates on it, that TOSFOS Shabbos, when you add on to Shabbos, Erev Shabbos, it can only be from Plag HaMincha and on. Plag HaMincha, as we know, is an hour and a quarter shoyes zmaniyos before Lila. And we'll talk how exactly you figure that out. Mincha Ketana is 2.5 hours. Plag HaMincha is an hour and a quarter. So, for instance, if a person would like to accept Shabbos out of himself 5 o'clock this coming Shabbos, it's worthless because you can't accept Shabbos before Plag HaMincha. Let's use the term, it's Tchilas Laila, it's the beginning of Laila, it's not Laila, but it doesn't allow you to be Makabel Shabbos before that. When do you have Plag HaMincha? So you do it, it's a machlokes between the Magen Avram and the Vilna Gaon. Many places can discuss it, but usually the first sheet is the Magen Avram and the second sheet is the Gaon. The most popular way to figure out Plag HaMincha according to the Magen Avram is you take Alois till Tzeis, you divide it up in 12 different parts. That's an hour, which is a Shah Zmaniyos. And then an hour and a quarter before Tzeis, that is when Plag HaMincha is going to come. Plag HaMincha means half of Mincha Ketana. Alternatively, according to the Gaon, you take it not from Alois till Tzeis, but you take it from Netz till Shkia, divide it up into 12 parts. A 12th is an hour. And then you have another quarter of an hour, and you have an hour and a quarter before Shkia, that is Plag HaMincha. Now, it's very unclear when Tzeis is according to Rabbeinu Tam, but classically, we accept 72 minutes. So let's think. I don't want to tax the Olam with too much math, but if you go from Alois till Tzeis, you have 72 minutes before Netz, which is Alois, 72 minutes after Shkia, which is Tzeis. So your day is going to be 144 minutes more than if you go from Netz till Shkia. Now, if it's 144 minutes, that means each hour is going to be a 12th of that. So each hour is going to be 12 minutes more. And if you have an hour and a quarter, it's going to be a fourth of 12, which is 15 minutes. Now, we know in many shuls they are makbid that if they're makabel Shabbos early and they daven Ma'ariv after Plag and they daven Mincha before Plag, they want to do it that way. Because if you daven Mincha after Plag and you daven Ma'ariv before Shki, it's a tarti d'sasra. Why? Because what gives us a right to daven Ma'ariv after Plag? Only if you want to go like Reb Yehuda. But if you go like the Rabbanan, you can't daven after, you have to daven at night. You can't daven after Plag. And if you daven Mincha after Plag, that's like the Rabbanan. So you can't have a tarti d'sasra. Many shuls are careful with that, not all shuls. So again, Mincha has to be before Plag, and Ma'ariv has to be after Plag, according to many poskim, and many shuls in America are careful. But which Plag are you going to do with the Plag of the Magen Avram, which is late? I think this past Shabbos is about 7:40. Or are you going to do with the Plag of the Vilna Gaon, which is roughly maybe 6:30? I'm not sure. I don't recall. Now, in my shul years ago, the early Plag was too early. People weren't back from work. So I said, hey, let's do the second. Mincha before the second Plag and Ma'ariv after the second Plag. And after doing the calculations a few times, I realized I don't have to calculate anymore. There's a 57-minute difference between the first Plag in the second plug. I'll leave it to you to figure that out after the shir. Maybe some people chop right now, but it's not relevant. But in any event, it's important to know that in halacha there are two plugs. There is a plug of the Vilna Gaon, which is 57 minutes earlier, and there's a plug of the Mogen Avram, which is 57 minutes later. It goes without saying that this is the machlokes when you have Kriya Shema. Is Kriya Shema like the Vilna Gaon, which is 36 minutes after the Kriya Shema of the Mogen Avram? Many of us are machmer like the Mogen Avram. Maybe not when we say it in shul, but we say Kriya Shema before we go to shul. Or is it 36 minutes earlier? So it's really a machlokes that affects many, many different halachas. So again, we have plug. Hamin can't make Shabbos before plug. Depends. If you go to Avram, plug is roughly 7:40, and if you go with the sheet of the Vilna Gaon, plug could be a good hour or more, 57 minutes before, the way I'm telling. So therefore, let's think ourselves now. Most shuls in America, when they accept Shabbos early, they do it with whose plug? They do it with the plug of the Vilna Gaon. Figure out when you're going to daven. Not everyone, but surely most shuls I'm familiar with. That was, my shul was about the only shul I knew at the time that went with the plug and the Mogen Avram. But I ask you a question. If you go with the plug of the Vilna Gaon, it comes out, according to the Mogen Avram, it's not Shabbos. It's not Shabbos. You can't accept Shabbos before plug HaMincha. It must be that if we're going like the Vilna Gaon, that is the Iker Halacha. And more troublesome, you lot Neiros Shabbos. The wife lit Neiros Shabbos. If you light Neiros Shabbos 6:30, whatever it is, you're lighting before plug. You can't light Neiros Shabbos according to the Chavetz Chaim so early. So really, I think it's a raya that the Iker Psak is the Vilna Gaon, because if it will be a suffix how to paskin, how could you make a bracha? The halacha is suffix brachas lahakel. So therefore, it would seem to me that the Iker Hara in Klal Yisrael, at least in all these Mekaymis throughout America, that accept Shabbos early, and the early Shabbos is based on the plug of the Vilna Gaon, which is before the plug of the Mogen Avram. They're making brachas, they're davening Shal Shabbos, they're doing everything that indicates Shabbos is Chal already. And if the halacha is like the Mogen Avram, it would seem the bracha is a bracha levatala. You can't make a bracha if you have any suffix. You can't make a bracha if you're in doubt. There's a Chavetz Chaim, if I remember, I think it's in Reish Tes Vav, that says even a svek sveka to make a bracha, because of the chumrah of bracha levatala, we don't allow you to make it. So it's interesting, even though we're machmir to say, many of us are machmir to say Kriya Shema to accommodate the sheet of the Mogen Avram, but still in all, when it comes to Erev Shabbos, and we're makabel Shabbos at the plug of the Gaon, which is before the plug of the Mogen Avram, we're not worried about making a bracha of Atala, which is very, very interesting. If it would be a suffix, l'chura, the halacha should be suffix brachas lahakal. So I think an interesting ha'ara. Now, I want to say a possible resolution, just to give a thought, and the Olam should think about it and see if maybe they could be marich on it. There's a very interesting taisus in Menachos on Daf Samach Vav. Taisus says Sfiras Omer is the Rabbanon. Both Shitas hold Sfiras Omer is the Rabbanon. This Mana said a Rambam Shita, not that way, but most Shitas that Sfiras Omer is the Rabbanon. Says Taisus, since Sfiras Omer is the Rabbanon, we're going to allow you to count Bein Hashmashis. Fine, but should you make a bracha? maybe Bein Hashmoshes is not night yet. Says Taisus, since it's Rabbanan, you could count and you could also make a bracha. Taisus L'chur is saying a svara that if something is midrabanan and Safek D'Rabbanan allows you to do the mitzvah, once you have a heter to do the mitzvah, you can make a bracha. So therefore, even though Sfiras Omer is the Rabbanan and I'm allowed to do Bein Hashmoshes, once I'm allowed to do Bein Hashmoshes, I can make a bracha. I would say the same thing here maybe. You are going to be Makabel Shabbos. According to the Magen Avraham, it is not Shabbos. According to the Magen Avraham, you cannot like Neiris Shabbos. According to the Magen Avraham, you can't daven Tfilas Arvis Shel Shabbos. It's not Shabbos, it's Chayil. But since it's a Dinei D'Rabbanan and you're allowed to do it Misafek at a time that maybe you will be Yaitza, then you can make brachas, and we don't say Safek brachas lahak. There's a lot to talk about that. In fact, the Gemara really in Masechta Brachas that says it's a Safek if we passing like Rabbi Yehuda and Rabbanan, which means if you could daven Ma'ariv before night after Plag, and the Gemara says the Ovid Kamar of it, the Ovid Kamar of it, you could pick either one you want. There's a Pella. What do you mean I could pick either one I want? If it's a Safek, I shouldn't be allowed to daven. You see also that concept, Kipshutai, that when you have a doubt in the Rabbanan, you're allowed to do it in the Safek Zman, and therefore you could also make a bracha. Al Kapanim, that is the horror. I'm not aware of those who are machmir to be makabel Shabbos early to be concerned about this. Like I said, very few places that I'm aware of. I just found one other shul after my shul that made the mincha before Plag of the Magen Avraham and the Ma'ariv after the Plag of the Magen Avraham. Most of us daven Ma'ariv if we make early Shabbos after the Plag of the Vilna Gaon. It's still day. It's still not Shabbos. It's a weekday. The teretz is we go like the Shitas Hagoin Meikir the Dina. So it shows you that the Magen Avraham sheet is not a sheet in halacha. I'm just suggesting maybe in the case of Safek, you could say if it's a D'Rabbanan, you could do the D'Rabbanan, hence you can make a bracha. We have to be mafalpul in that. We have to think about it. I recall that I told HaRav Avram Yeshua this raya, and he said he accepted the raya. It seems that the Magen Avraham sheet is not Iker sheet. But then I thought with this Taisa Menachos, maybe we could have a little understanding that a Safek D'Rabbanan can be done in a time of Safek. Once you could do it in a time of Safek, you can make the bracha. Okay, that is the introductory topic, that the halacha of being makabel Shabbos could only be after Plag HaMincha. But when Plag HaMincha is, of course, that is a controversy throughout the Mishnah Berurah. The Mishnah Berurah mentions that controversy, and there's no indication in the Mishnah Berurah that he favors one sheet over the other. So it is a interesting shaila how we do it, unless if you want to use that taisis in Masechta Menachos to explain it. Now I want to talk about what is the essence of Taisus Shabbos. What is it? What exactly is the nature? What are we doing? There's an extreme shita which is not accepted of the Taz, that when you're makabel Taisus Shabbos, let's say in Eretz Yisrael, on Sukkot that's running into Shmini Atzeres, and you're makabel Taisus Yontif, you don't have to eat it in the Sukkot. Why? It becomes Shmini Atzeres already, and they all say, what do you mean it becomes Shmini Atzeres? Because I was makabel Kedushas Shmini Atzeres on the day before the Yontif of Sukkot is chased away. He seems to learn when you're makabel Taisus Yontif for Taisus Shabbos, it's already the next day. It's the next day, then you don't have to sort of suck anymore. But all achrayim are chaylik on that. Whatever it is, but the next day doesn't chase away the day before. It happens to be Sukkot and Shmini Atzeres simultaneously. So therefore, a chayva sukkah is still on us. But there is a Taz we must remember that says if you makabel Shmini Atzeres, you don't eat in the sukkah, because the Taisus of Shmini Atzeres makes it Shmini Atzeres, which is mafkia the yontiv of Sukkot, which is also a chiddush gadol. I just reminded myself of a Maisa Shahoya. I remember I said this over in the mountains, must be 20 years ago, that I was eating a Suda with Rabbi Friedler, Zechreinu Levracha. We were speaking, we had a Yachikal in the Catskills, but also in Tannersville. I was speaking at a Yachikala, and there was Maisa Shahoya Kachoy. There was a child that was born, and the bris was slated for Friday. However, they looked at the child and they felt that the bris could not be performed bismanoi. However, after the bungalow colony was makabel Shabbos, a doctor came, he looked at the child and he said, this is a misdiagnosis. The child is healthy. The child can have a bris. So right away the question arose, could you do it on Shabbos? It was before night. They made early Shabbos. And the simple answer, I'm not going to go into Hilchos now, is that why can't you do it on Shabbos? Even though you're makabel Shabbos, but Milas Deicha Shabbos. As I expressed then, the fact that you're makabel Shabbos doesn't make it, it's not Yom HaShmini. It's still Yom HaShmini. The fact that you're makabel Shabbos doesn't make it Yom HaChi. It's not really Saturday. It's still Friday. There was a lot of talk. But anyway, I remember that sparked a lot of discussion. The little baby had a lot of schusim. He sparked a lot of halacha discussions. But that is Pashup Shah. Taisa Shabbos does not chase away the day before, as the Taz says. Of course, the Taz is a Shita, but Taisa Shabbos, what it does is bring the Kedusha early. But what exactly is the nature of this Taisa Shabbos? Now, there's halacha in Reis Samach Aleph, Sif Daled, that says, after you say Baruch Hu, even though it's still day, you can't make an Erev, you can't make Hatmana, because you were Makabel Shabbos. And L'Didon, when we say Mizmer Shirli Yom HaShabbos, that is as if you were Makabel Shabbos. Now, to give a little background, to understand it a little bit better, the concept of Bein HaShmoshes, we know, is Safek Yom, Safek Laila, and you could do a Shvus, and the Rabbanan can be done, or many Rabbanans can be done, with Tzarech Mitzvah, with Tzarech Gadol. You could do Atmana, you can make an Erev. Certain Rabbanans, we allow you to do Bein HaShmoshes, even though it's Safek Yom, Safek Laila. However, says the Mechaber, that that's only if you didn't say Baruch Hu. But if you were Makabel Shabbos, then already it's not Safek Shabbos, Safek not Shabbos. It's Vade Shabbos. And therefore, you cannot do these Isuri D'Rabbanan Bein HaShmoshes, even though L'Tzarech Mitzvah or even L'Tzarech Gadol. So again, Kabbalah Shabbos precludes the heter of doing things Bein HaShmoshes, because the Kabbalah Shabbos doesn't have the leniency that b'mokum Bein HaShmoshes le'gazu b'Rabbanan. And the Achrayna Me'as Akasha, the Bir Halacha, discusses it here. If you look in Siman Shin Tzadik Gimel, Sif Beis, it's a machlokes. Whether after your Makabel Shabbos, can you do Isuri D'Rabbanan b'Shas Chag? And more so, over there it's mashma that we lean towards the matirim. We lean towards the matirim. So it's a pella. Here in Reis Samach Aleph, it says after Kabbalah Shabbos, you don't have the Kula Bein HaShmosh, is that you could do Isuri D'Rabbanan b'Shas Chag. And there in Shin Tzadik Gimel, it's brought down a machlokes. And the Tia in Halacha seems to be L'Kula, it's a stira. This is a kasha Achrayim asks, Mishnah Berurah in the Bir Halacha is Marich, and I want to share with you the resolution of the Dogel Mervava, the Noida B'Yehuda, of course, and the Rav Shulchan Aruch that are very similar. They say a chidush that there are two types of TOSFOS Shabbos. There is a TOSFOS Shabbos which they say you have Itzuma Shel Yom. That's the lashon of the Rav Shulchan Aruch. You made the kedusha bichal earlier. You made the kedusha bichal earlier. It's Shabbos already, and then you have a TOSFOS Shabbos that it's not truly Shabbos. It doesn't have the kedusha Shabbos, but it's Osir b'Malacha. I don't want to use this terminology, but I will just for explanatory reasons, as if there's halacha. Stop malacha early to make sure you won't violate Shabbos. It's maybe a geder, a shmira, but it's not really Shabbos. The kedusha Shabbos is a different taisis yontif. So now, kan haben shoyel. So when do I have this one? When do I have that one? It's very nice. Chavetz Chaim says whether you makabel b'yachid or b'rabin. In Rishonim you find already in the Ritva that you're only makabel taisis Shabbos, presumably the kedusha Shabbos, with a baruch hu, with a kiddush, not just by saying I'm in makabel Shabbos. But there are two types of Kabbalah Shabbos. When one is chal, when is not the other one chal, avada you have to know. You have to know. I'm giving you two suggestions: Yochid and Rabin, and maybe if you do it with a baruch hu, you do it with a kiddush. Not stam you say I'm being makabel Shabbos. But the difference is remarkable. I'm being makabel Shabbos. I can't do malacha, but it's not really Shabbos. But if you do it, as I'm saying from the Ritva and Rosh Hashanah, Testament days, if you do it with a Maisa, with a Baruch Hu, with a Shemona Esrei, with a Kiddush, then the Kedusha Shabbos is Chal. Now, I want to just jump ahead a little bit and we'll come back. If I ask you what's the difference, well, we have one difference, that if it's only Isuri Malacha, then just like Ben Hashmoshes, we allow you to do Isuri Rabbanan L'Tzairich, even if you makabel Shabbos, you could do Isuri Rabbanan, which is a Tzarich. So the person says, I'm makabel Shabbos. Okay, he was makayim the mitzvah of Taisa Shabbos, but it's not really Shabbos yet. So therefore, we allow you to do Isuri Rabbanan L'Tzairich mitzvah. But if I made Kedusha Shabbos, Itzuma Shel Yom, the lashon of the Rav Shulchan Aruch, with a baruch, with a kiddush, then already it's Kedusha Shabbos, then we won't allow you to do Isuri Rabbanan because it's already more chomer than Ben Hashmoshes. Ben Hashmoshes is characterized by a kula that I could do Isuri Rabbanan L'Tzairich. Kabbalah Shabbos of Malacha is characterized by that also. However, if you have Kedusha Shabbos, Itzuma Shel Yom, then you can't do any Malacha Bein Hashmos. I just want to mention a Gavurche that when we make a Kabbalah Shabbos with Kedusha Shabbos, Amir Lakim is still mutter. It's negay. You could tell the guy still to do something with Tzarech. That the Chavetz Chaim says we're makel. But other shvusim you can't do. So again, there's an Isuri Malacha and there is a Kedusha Shabbos. And I'm just suggesting that it says after Kabbalah Shabbos, you can't daven Mincha Shachol anymore. Maybe that's only the Kabbalah Shabbos of Kedusha Shabbos. But you could daven Mincha after you are put Isuri Malach on yourself because it's not really Shabbos. Because I always wonder when you daven a minyan that doesn't hustle and Mincha finishes maybe after Shkia, or Kabbalah Shabbos begins at the beginning of Shkia, right after Shkia, how you makayim your mitzvah of Taisa Shabbos? Possibly, you say, I'm a Kabbalah Yisur Malacha. That's enough to be makayim the mitzvah of Taisa Shabbos, even though you don't have the Kedushas HaShabbos on you before. This is really the Yesod of the Dogel Mervava and the Yesod of the Rav Shulchan Aruch to answer the stira, what is permissible during Bein Hashmoshes. It depends what type of Taisvus Shabbos you have. And I want to, before I present a Taisvus, famous Taisvus in the yeshiva world, I want to just mention that it's a very interesting shaila whether you could be Yaitse your Suda Erev Shabbos before night. Even those who are Makabel Shabbos. Chavetz Chaim says, but be sure to eat something at night. Don't finish your Suda during the day. Some hold you can finish during the day. Why not? And some hold you have to eat into the night. There's a famous Trumas Hadesh, if I'm not mistaken, I did not look it up because I didn't have it in mind, that he says that after they were Makabel Shabbos early, they used to take a walk on the river, and it was light as if it was the middle of the day. They seemed to finish the Suda before night. Chavetz Chaim tells us, finish the Suda at night. Now, it could very well be to say that if you hold there's a Kabbalah Shabbos of Kedusha Shabbos, then you can finish during the day. But if you hold the whole concept, I'm saying both are there. There is Isuri Shabbos and Kedusha Shabbos. But if you hold the whole Kabbalah Shabbos is only Isuri Shabbos, it's not really Shabbos. You cannot be Yoitza the Suda before it actually becomes Shabbos. The way I'm saying, the Dogma Rav is saying there are both. There's Isuri Shabbos, and there also is a concept of Kedusha Shabbos. Now, there's a famous Taisus in Psachim, Rabbi Chanan speaks about it. I heard this from HaRav Shmuel Birnbaum, my Rebbe, Zecher Tzadik Lavracha. In the beginning of our Psachim, which is Tzadik Tesam and Beis, the first Mishnah says, Erev Psachim Samach Lamincha Layoichel Ad Shetechshach. Don't eat until it becomes dark. Taisus wonders, what's this business, don't eat until it becomes dark? So Taisus says a very interesting, why says until it becomes dark? Don't eat. When do you think? You can't eat until you make the Seder. So Taisus says a very interesting aside. He says, really, you shouldn't eat to be night to make the Seder. You can make the Seder during the day. Why not? Tosfos Shabbos. And he brings down the Gemara and Brachas. A person could daven Erev Shabbos, and he says, Kiddush M'bayit Yom. So therefore, really, you can make your Seder during the day, just like you could eat your Suda and make your Kiddush during the day, like I mentioned before. However, Taisus says matzah is something very special. It says, you have to eat the basar when it's night. Even though Taisus Shabbos is bringing Shabbos early, and Taisus Yontif is bringing Yontif early, however, it's not night. So therefore, Suda Shabbos, oh, you have the Taisus there. You see the Taisus over there on the right side. So Taisus says in his teretz, the Gabi Matzah Dafka B'Nachetechshach, because it says over there, HaPesach Homatzah Mor Mitzvasim Shetechshach V'Tayim Mishim Yosiv V'Ochlu Es HaBasar V'Halayla Hazeh. It says you have to have night, and therefore Pesach Matzah Mor is all mukish together, and therefore you have to have night in order to eat the matzah. And it's not close to Pesach. Good. So why do you have to eat the matzah? You eat the matzah at night, start the Haggadah. It would be great if we could start the Haggadah now before we eat the matzah, because it won't be so late. The teretz is, the Haggadah has to be, Zman sheyesh matzah b'nachman fanecha. This is Pesach halachas. It's important. But what do we see from Taisus? Taisus wanted you to be kind the mitzvah of matzah before night. Taisus says matzah has a unique halacha. What's the unique halacha matzah has? Matzah is mukish to Pesach, and Pesach says v'ochos habasar b'alaylo hazeh, meaning to say that you need night. Taisus Shabbos would allow you to be kind the mitzvah of matzah, even though it's only Tosfos, but the pasuk of Laila indicates it's not good enough to be Pesach. You need the night of Pesach. Fine. So Rabbi Chanan points out from Taisus it's clear that the mitzvah you could be makayim even during the zman of Tosfos. It's clear. The only reason why not, because it says Laila. That's this Maramakim. Then we go to Ksuvis Mem Zayin. There's a steer I heard when I was a bacher in the Mir Yeshiva from Rabbi Chanan. I think Rabbi Chanan happens to be in Masechta Psachim. Over there, the Gemara on Daf Mem Zayin wants to know, how do you know the Maisi Yadayim of an Isha, of a young girl, belong to the father? Interesting shaila. As we see over here, Menayin Shemaisa Bas Liyov, Shenemar V'Yimkar Isha Spita L'Oma, and the Gemara goes through various rayas. Then the Gemara says, if you go a little further down, the Gemara says, a father could take his daughter to the chuppah. There's nem tzeit. It takes time. He's being mavatal her from work. How can he be mavatal from work? It must be the work belongs to him. A Gemara. So if I ask you, how do you know a daughter's Maisi Yadayim belongs to the father? Because he could bring her to the chuppah. If he could bring her to the chuppah, it's disrupting her work. If she owns the money from her work, it would be incorrect for him to take her to the chuppah. So the Gemara says the fact that he can take her to the chuppah is a raya that Maisi Yadayim belongs to the father. Then the Gemara says a little bit light, it's not a raya. Maybe he pays it for the lost work. He makes a chuppah at night. At night is not a time for work. He gave her into the chuppah Shabbos and Yontif. Shabbos and Yontif, that happens to be a time she doesn't work. So really, you could say Maisi Yadayim do not belong to the father. How can he bring her to the chuppah? It's disruptive. Her work is being lost, and he has no right. If he does not own the Maisi Yadayim, he'll give her to the chuppah at a time when there's no disruption. Maybe at night when it's not working hours, or on Shabbos and Yom. Tosfos asks a kasha. It says in the halacha, "V'samachta b'chagecha v'loy b'ishtecha." You don't marry women on Chol Hamoed. So it's a big kasha because ein marvin simcha v'simcha, and Tosfos proves it's a drasha gemura. So Tosfos asks a peltic kasha. The Gemara says you marry off your daughter on Yontif, and hence you don't disrupt her work schedule, because if you disrupt her work schedule, it would be incorrect if the father doesn't own the work schedule. Therefore, you have no raya. He gives her over on Yontif. Correct, Tosfos, you can't get married on Yontif. How can you get married on Yontif? On Yontif is the din of v'samach chagecha v'loy b'ishtecha ein ma'arvin simcha b'simcha, which is the raisa. So Tosfos gives a gavaldik teretz. Ikal ameimer the hochayri shah achas l'vnei Yontif shuki Yontif lin miliyacha the Tosfos the raisa ubetela ba'oisa shah min malach. Tosfos says it's talking about during Tosfos Yontif, and during Tosfos Yontif there is no bitul malacha, but there's no issur to get married. So that's the cheshbon of the Gemara. That theoretically we have no proof that a father gets Maisi Yadayim of a child because he could give her over to chuppah during Tosfos Yontif. On Yontif itself, there's a din of samachtem chagecha v'loy b'ishtecha. So he could give her over. He could give her over during Tosfos Yontif, and Tosfos Yontif is the raisa. Avada, there's no bitul malacha because it's also b'malacha, but yet there's no issur to get married. Why is there no issur to get married during Tosfos Yontif? Presumably because Tosfos Yontif is not truly like Yontif. Oh, it's not truly like Yontif? But I thought you said you can mekayim the mitzvah matzah during Tosfos Yontif, if not for the Gezeres HaKosav of Laila. So we see Tosfos Yontif from the Gemara, from the Taisim Psachim, has the din of Yontif, the mekayim the mitzvah matzah. Why shouldn't it have the din of Simcha, Pisamachta b'chagecha v'loy b'ishtecha? So Rabbi Chanan says, Taisim Psachim is mashma, that Tosfos Yontif is so powerful that it gives you the halachas of Yontif, that you can be kind of mitzvah of matzah, if not for the halacha of Laila. But when it comes to marriage, We let you get married during Taisus Yantav. I says, no, that's only on Yantav itself, not during Taisus Yantav. This is Rabbi Chanan's kasha, a stira or a machlokes between two Taisus. Now, I heard a teretz from a barrel, my Rebbe, Zechariah Levracha, and my Shver Zechariah Levracha. And they said very good, that the Gemara in Psachim says that there's no mitzvah of simcha at night. V'yisa ach samech, l'mayit lel rishon misimcha. I think it's Daf Samach Aleph. So if there's no simcha at night, so there's no simcha on Taisus Yantav. If there's no simcha at night, there's no simcha on Taisus Yantav. So when Taisus Yantav says there's no simcha, when Taisus says that by Taisus Yantav there's no simcha, he doesn't because Taisus Yantav is not sufficient for Yantav. It's sufficient that you can eat matzah then, if not for Laila. And it would be sufficient for simcha. But how could it be simcha by Taisus Yantav? If at night there's no mitzvah of simcha, so surely by Taisus Yantav there's no mitzvah of simcha, because simcha starts during the day. This is what they both said, which seems to be a powerful teretz. The only thing is, the Olam, I don't know if I can hear the Olam, has to ask a question. So why does the Gemara Taisus say Taisus Yantav? Let Taisus say it's talking about that the marriage took place at night. If at night there's no mitzvah simcha, you can make a chasna at night. Why talk about Taisus Yantav? Why don't you just talk about night? Why talk about Taisus Yantav? Let's just talk about night. Ashtarka Shaila. The teretz is simple, my Shver said. If you recall the Gemara before, the Gemara gave another answer when he could give over Ma'as Yadayim without disrupting, give over his daughter to Chuppah without disrupting Ma'as Yadayim. The Gemara said, Laila, every night there's no work. The Gemara wanted a case during the day, Shabbos for Yantiv. For Taisus Yantiv during the day, it's Aser. And for Taisus, we're talking about Taisvis Yantiv. Taisus Yantiv is a day, and we ask, why is it Taka? Why is it Taka, not Aser? L'chura Taisus Yantiv has a din of Yantiv, because the night there's no mitzvah simcha. By Taisus Yantiv, there's also no mitzvah simcha. So just to recap, we're learning Taisus Yantiv here. Of Vada would be all mitzvahs at night. You can eat the mitzvah, you kind the mitzvah of matzah, and maybe, like I said before, you can eat your Seder Shabbos during Taisus Yantiv. It's a full Yantiv. So why can you get married during Taisus Yantiv? If Taisus Yantiv is a full Yantiv, there should be a mitzvah simcha. You know why? If there's no mitzvah of simcha at night, how could there possibly be a mitzvah of simcha during Taisus Yantiv? The mitzvah of simcha only starts the first day after the first night. A beautiful teretz. It's a question like Rabbi Chanan. He should have said this teretz. But I asked a shaila, not to my Rebbe Rebel, because I didn't hear the teretz from him. I saw it brought down his name, but I asked my shver. I have a Vilna Gaon not like the teretz. And it's really a din in Shulchan Aruch, in Hilchos Nida. The question arises, could a Nida make a hefsek taira after Kabbalah Shabbos? What's the shaila? Maybe Kabbalah Shabbos is the next day, or maybe Kabbalah Shabbos is night. So after Kabbalah Shabbos, you should be able to make a hefsek taira. Says the Goyin, and it really comes from an Ogur. Shach brings it down. That you can make a hefsek taira after Kabbalah Shabbos. Why? Because Taisus says there's no simcha by Taisus Shabbos. If Taisus Shabbos is like night, there should be simcha. And Taisus says there's no simcha by Taisus Shabbos, you can get married. If Taisus Shabbos would be like night, there should be simcha and you couldn't get married. Gewalt. We're saying at night there's no simcha. That's what Taisus means, Taisus Shabbos, there's no simcha. If you learn Taisus means that there's no simcha by Taisus, because night there's no simcha, so Taisus can't be better than night, right? So then you have no raya whatsoever. Vaischais from Taisus, Vaischais from the Goy. that Bemis Taisa Shabbos, there's no simcha, even though at night there is simcha. So what do you see? Taisa Shabbos doesn't become mamish like night. So you can make a hefsek tire. You can make a hefsek tire. But if Taisa Shabbos would be mamish like night, you can't make a hefsek tire. But if you learn, like the Rebbe said, and like the Shver said, that at night there's no mitzvah simcha, so by Taisa Shabbos there's surely no mitzvah simcha, the Goyen has no raya. Maybe Taisa Shabbos is a mamish like night, but at night there's no mitzvah simcha. I hope the Olam follows that, because I think it's a very strong argument against this last teretz. There's not riches, but this is not so much our sugya. But I want to bring back what I said before to reconcile these two Taisins, a big yesai. If you recall, which I'm sure you do, there is a Noid B'Yehuda, and there is a Rav Shulchan Aruch that there are two Taisvis Shabbos v'Yom Tov. There's one Mitzumil Shel Yom. There's one Mit Kedushas Hayoim. That's Mamash Shabbos and Yom Tov. And there's also one only with Yisuri Malacha. So then, if you say like this, it's Gavaldik. Taisus on Tzadik Tesam and Bey says you can be Yotze Mitzvah during Taisus Shabbos, just like you can make Kiddush and you can eat the Suda during Taisus Shabbos. That's, of course, if you're Makabel the Kedushas Hayoim. If you're Makabel the Kedushas Hayoim, it's Mamish like Shabbos. Mamish like Shabbos. You can't do Malachas D'Rabbanan L'Tzairich. You can make Kiddush and Davin Shel Shabbos. You could eat matzah if not for Laila. And Avada, you'd have the mitzvah simcha. I just want to mention, even though the Gemara says there's no mitzvah simcha at night, Reb Chaim in Stensel, but it's almost in Rishonim, there's no korban simcha at night. But many Rishonim hold there is a mitzvah simcha at night. Avada by Taisa Shabbos, you have a mitzvah simcha. You have everything. Taisa Shabbos, Shabbos, the whole bar. It doesn't mean it's night. It's day. But it's day with Kedushas Shabbos. It's day with Kedushas Yom Tov. You can eat matzah if not for Laila. There is a mitzvah of simcha. There is a mitzvah of simcha. Oh. But when it comes to the Taisis and Ksuvis, the Goyen may not shtim with this also, I have to say, in Cheshbon, but I think it's a good teretz. Maybe I have a kasha in the Goyen for me also. But it's Medurik and Loshna Taisis. But if you learn, there's a second type of Taisis Shabbos. The second type of Taisis Shabbos is your Makabali Surei Malacha. You really don't have Kedushas Hayoim on you. You only have Yisuri Malacha. If you look at the Lashon HaTaisis, Taisis says, Shuki Yontif Le'inyan Malacha. We're not talking about Kedushas Yontif. We're talking about Yisuri Malacha. That's the Kabbalah Shabbos that only prohibits you from Malacha, but doesn't make it like Shabbos. It won't allow you to eat matzah. It won't give you a mitzvah of simcha. It only gives you Isuri Malacha. If it only gives you Isuri Malacha, then of course you're not going to have a mitzvah of simcha. And Taisus never suggested that you would have an ability to makayim the mitzvah of matzah, if not for Laila. I'll call upon him. This is the teretz. With the Goyen, you have to be mefapel to be yashiv, but I just came to be more with the kasha of the Goyen. But the way I'm saying, I think we reconcile both Taisus. That if you have makabel Shabbos b'kedushasa with all the chumras of kedusha Shabbos, of all the mitzvah Shabbos, you can eat the Suda Shabbos. Then you can makayim matzah, not for the mitzvah Laila. Avada, there's a mitzvah of simcha. But if you go with the halacha of Isuri Malacha, it's just Isuri Malacha. It's not really Shabbos. It's not really Yom Tov. So you don't have the Chaimer. You don't have the Kedusha that's Mechayiv. And it's a very big nafka min halacha. If a person makes Taisis Yom Tov, or let's say Taisis Yom Tov, is a Mavatal Avelis, because is there a mitzvah of Simcha or not? So first you have to say, like Rishonim, that there's a mitzvah of Simcha at night, which there's a mitzvah of Simcha at night, at least the Rabbanan the Shagasai says. And then you have to know, but is there a mitzvah simcha during Taisvis? So the way I'm saying, in Vensach, what type of Kabbalas Yom Tov it was. If it's a Kabbalas Yom Tov Yisuri Malacha, then Avada, there wouldn't be a mitzvah simcha. But if it's a Kabbalah of Kedushas Hayoim, then it really has the dinim of Yom Tov and Shabbos, and then it would have all the dinim. Even you could even be yaitza the mitzvah of matzah, not for the Xeris Akosov of Bible. Okay, it was a pleasure giving this year. I hope the Olam followed, which I'm sure they did. If you have any worries, you're welcome to. I don't know how you can email the Kol, and I'll be happy to respond if I can. Everyone should have a good day, and Hatzlacha, for arranging such a beautiful event. Everyone should be well. Be'ezus Hashem.